So Nathanael asked Jesus, "Where did you get to know me?" And I think this is a real question for all of us, that all of us face in one way or another. I mean, either it's the fear side of things, does God know me? Or to try and think back, when did I actually come to know God? When did this become real? And as we are inherently narcissistic, the question becomes, how did God come to know me specifically? And when I look back on it, I go all the way back to the beginning and I see, well, I started knowing God because my parents made me know God. They took me against my will, got me up early in the morning and brought me to church and sat me down. They put me through everything, the classes, the Sunday school, even the nativity play. I still remember in our nativity play, it was a pretty sparse one, but the one thing I remember is that, of all things, I was the nativity star, which my parents informed me several times that meant I was the star of the play, which was a lot of pressure. I was only 3 or 4 at the time, so I'm wearing this Epiphany star around my head. And I just remember standing there with everyone looking at me like you're all looking at me now. Obviously, times have changed. And I ripped the star off my head, threw it down, and ran out. That's my first major memory of being in a church. My first major memory of coming to know God. God apparently wanted everyone to stare at me and then for me to run out in tears. Maybe I got that wrong, but that's how it felt at the time. And then to make things even murkier, I also had to go to the Catholic church with my grandparents. I went to Lutheran with my parents and Catholic church with my grandparents. Not in that order, because Catholic church was always very early. But from a very early age, I realized no one agrees. No one has the same answers. Catholics don't think the same thing that Lutherans think. So I'd come and I'd learn, and I asked the priest, what about this? And the priest would tell me one thing. And then I'd go and talk to the pastor, and he'd say, oh, that doesn't make any sense. Those Catholics are crazy. And so that's what I learned pretty early on about God, was that we don't have all the answers. And that doubt set pretty quick. The uncertainty, the questioning, as I came from those Catholic Lutheran beginnings to eventually my mom winning out and me going to the Lutheran church. And I remember just always asking pastors all these questions. Okay, there was a worldwide flood. And God got every animal into the ark. How is that possible? How is that, and from my kind of way of thinking, I need real answers. I need, okay, there were 50 pigeons over here, there were 30 doves over there, no unicorns, obviously, that's why we don't have unicorns anymore. But they couldn't give me those answers. They couldn't. And then the questions became those unspoken ones. Those ones where I would wonder up at God, how can you send anybody to hell? Even somebody that does something evil for 50 years, how can you send somebody to hell for eternity? And those are those questions that aren't regularly spoken, and I didn't hear an answer. For a long, long time, I didn't hear an answer, and I started to wonder, did God forget about me? Did I actually find God? And then, as most of you know, I went to Assisi, Italy. And I heard this monk speak to me the words of God. I felt it. He answered these questions I'd been wondering in my head, and suddenly I knew it. I have found God. God is with me. God is real. And I was so caught up in that moment that it really caught me unawares later when I realized what God had found me. What God had I found? So as I did in my normal way, I went out searching again. I went out asking and asking. And finally I heard this great story, this great proof for Jesus. That in the gospel you have the disciples. And they are not the brightest lot, but they reject Jesus. They pretend they've never met him. They don't even know him at all. And then just a little while later, they all come back. They all come back to the point where they're willing to die for this man that they earlier pretended they didn't even know. What happened in the middle? What happened to change them to the point of denial to giving up their lives? The only thing that made sense was resurrection. The resurrection of Jesus. And then again, I thought, I found it. I found Jesus. That is the one true God. That is reality. That is what's right. But then I thought back to my earlier childhood and I started wondering, okay, but which Jesus? The Catholic Jesus? The Protestant Jesus? The Eastern Orthodox Jesus? Jehovah's Witness Jesus? Mormon Jesus? Which Jesus? So like any good scholar, I obviously went and got an undergraduate degree in comparative religion and philosophy to get to the bottom of this matter. And it's decided. I've understood it. I've taken the classes. I got the good grades. Except for that last year of undergrad. And everything I'd wondered about, everything I'd questioned, all this idea of finding and claiming, made me wonder, okay, maybe God claimed me. But how do I know I can trust God? I mean, the gods I've been studying are pretty temperamental. You know, you got the Roman gods, you got the Greek gods, you got the God of the Old Testament. Sometimes they didn't seem like they cared about us all that much. What if my God was like that? How do I know I can trust this God that says, oh, don't worry about dying. Don't worry about that thing where everything ends. I'm going to take care of that. How am I supposed to trust that? I've never seen God. I've never, other than that monk speaking, I've never really heard God. And this whole thing sent me into a terror to again find that trust, find God. And so I went and talked to people, and they gave me answers, but I didn't like their answers. I went and read book after book, and the books were good, but I didn't get that answer. Finally, I went into this church and knelt down. I actually snuck into a church in the middle of the night. I went around and tried all these churches until I could get inside one. And I snuck in and I kneeled down at the altar and I prayed, God, if you're real, rip off the rooftop and let me know that you're here. This was before I ever dealt with a property committee and I realized how angry they would be that God tore off the roof. But I didn't care at that point. I wanted God to tear off this rooftop. But it didn't happen. It didn't happen. I couldn't find God. I searched and I couldn't find God. But then I let go. I let go of the me that was going to accomplish this, the me that was going to study this, the me that was going to conquer the most powerful force that has ever existed, and to keep it in my pocket and pull it out when I need a magic trick. I let go of all of that. And then God arrived. Pretty much the moment I let go. I've been praying and praying for signs. And the minute I said, okay, God, I realize it's not going to work like this. I realize I've been too selfish. I'm going to let you take the lead. I probably didn't actually believe that, but I said the words. And I think sometimes that's important. And at that moment, I saw a guy walking down the road with a big shirt that just said signs. And I really felt God was mocking me at that point, but it was what I've been praying for. God had given me a sign. And at the same time, I was very lonely because these spiritual quests is a lonely experience. And so I said, God, send me a companion, someone that I can talk to, someone that will listen to me. And at that moment, I saw a little caterpillar crawling across my dashboard. Not the person I was hoping for, but something for me to talk to. And a number of times I've even sat in these pews and prayed that God would give me the strength to be the pastor that I'm supposed to be in this place. And I felt God radiating light within me, sitting in these pews. Was that as good as a mission plan? No. Was that as good as what I should do next Sunday? No. But it doesn't work like that. The more you try, and the more you try to find God, you realize the truth of the matter. God finds you. God finds you again and again, day after day. Once I've found God, I'll find God again. What had been in my early life an angry God that became a judgmental God, that became a careless God, is now a loving God. God changes for you each day. You find God again and again. With that in mind, I'd like to ask you very briefly to think about ways that you have found God in your lives, or God has found you, more likely. Now, you obviously don't have as much time as I took to do that, but would anybody be willing to just kind of talk a little bit about how Jesus found you, God found you? Chuck.
I was at a trade show. It was my birthday, August 11th. The sun had been shining. I was in the building. It was a building that was a temporary building. We were working away on our display. We were going to show our wares, and I was feeling very proud and full of myself. And look how far I had come, and I'd done it without God. Someone ran in the building and said, "Tornado." This is Salt Lake City. You don't have tornadoes in Salt Lake City. Certainly not in August when it's sunny. The building shook. We all ran for the door. The roof lifted off, unlike with you.
Right.
Literally did. All I knew was there was pressure. There was matter flying everywhere. I knelt to the ground. I put my hands on my head. So I learned how to do duck and cover being in California. And I did the duck and cover, and I said, oh Lord, please, God. Lord, please, God, protect me, and I'll be yours. The tornadoes subsided. Hailstones began to fall down. Now, this is August, and it's cold, hailstones. And I'm shaking, and I look up, and my hands have splinters in them. I look around, I see people wandering around with blood streaming from their faces. I go to a rearview mirror of a car, side view mirror. I look, I'm unscathed. I just have a few splinters. I made a commitment. And the rest is history. I've been serving the Lord ever since. And I truly say that I believe if it had not been for the Lord, I probably would have been injured because someone not 100 yards away was killed.
Wow.
So I just say, praise the Lord that He's really there and He really does protect you if you call on Him.
Oh, please.
It's rather an interesting story for me. My father died when I was 15. And my sister and I were in bed. And all of a sudden she says, "Bev, look." And I look, and there's Jesus Christ. I'm able to see Him from here up. All she remembered was His heart.
I think the major point of all these stories, at least as I take away, the major point of all these stories is that it has nothing to do with us going and finding God, going and finding Jesus, of claiming Him like He's something that's been hiding in the cushions of our couch. God comes to us. That's what the story of Christmas is. God came to us when we couldn't go to God. That's the story of Epiphany, not that, we humans finally tracked down Jesus. We're such good trackers. A star of God led us to Jesus. The Easter story is not about how we're so smart that we figured out a way to cheat death. It's that God came and tracked down those people that went before us and brought them back from the grips of death. How do we find Jesus? How did I find Jesus? How did Chuck or Bev find Jesus? We don't. God finds us. God tracks us down. God seeks us out. God calls us home. And then God finds us again. And again. And again and again. As many times as is needed. Amen.